The Matthew Dark Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, praise God and welcome in. This is the Matthew Dark Show. Now remember, hit subscribe everywhere you get your shows. Never miss a beat on that. It's election season. Primaries are coming. Midterms are coming. We have November, a chance for a lot of states to take back their states and to get a little nibble on the swamp that has taken over so many. It doesn't matter the state. Of course, today we have Denny LaVé. Now, he is running for U.S. Senate in Idaho. I want to welcome you in, sir. And I'd love to just, before we get going, now, what I see in the news flash, okay, Idaho's going to do things like, if you touch our kids, we'll kill you. And that's a policy on our show too, right? You touch our children, we'll kill you, period. And I'll stamp approval on that every day. But inside of Idaho politics, I wonder if you can just give us a feel on, if you've been there 26 years now and where we're at today, just give us a little temperature check on the state of Idaho and why you're running to make those changes.
There's some interesting stuff going on that I've uncovered in the campaign so far, right? You see, you would think Idaho would be pretty aggressively anti-immigration, anti-illegal immigration, right? And then you find out that, actually, there's a whole bunch of agribusiness and other industries that have built themselves around illegal immigration inside of Idaho, and those folks sponsor a lot of politicians and support a lot of politicians, and they Idaho, from a political side, has a lot of resistance to enforcing immigration laws, and that's unfortunate. We talk about wanting to have better lives for our kids, and we talk about the importance of family farms, but we build out this infrastructure and these industries in a way that doesn't allow our kids to get involved, right? And maximizes the profits of the agri corporations at the expense of everyday Idahoans, right? So that's an interesting thing I've come across. And then the other thing is to kind of go, okay, this wasn't a real surprise, but to see the established Republican infrastructure kind of be perfectly okay with, an 83-year-old senator who doesn't have a real track record to stand on in his 18 years in the Senate. We did a poll in February, and we asked, in your own words, tell us what Senator Rich has done as senator. And out of 4,600 respondents, very few said anything at all. But of the ones that did respond, they actually pointed back to things he did prior to being senator. And then of the things they're pointing to while he's been a senator, it's actually been executive orders. It hasn't actually been legislative success. So it's kind of like, what kind of bang for our buck are we getting, really?
Exactly. Yeah. And I do think it's important to understand that whether they're conservative establishment or Democrat establishment, they're wrong for the current times of the people. You said 83 years old. I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful that we have these geriatric senior citizens that in most cases, if they didn't have a staff surrounding them 24/7, they're not capable of any of this work. And we continue to do this. That phenomena, is that the American voter, the state voter, just saying, I don't even want to deal with this. They say he's good. Just put me down. Republicans, we go this way. Democrats, we go this way. Are they fooled and tricked? And actually, can't they see that things are not improving? And it's this lie stacked on that lie. And then it's like, our kids can't buy a home. Food's too expensive. Where do we work? What is going on in the voters' mind where they allow this repetition of just garbage candidates get in there? They cement themselves in politics, and it's like impossible to get them out. What is going on there?
But in a state like Idaho, I think a lot of it comes down to people believe the election is in November.
Right.
And so what most people don't understand here in Idaho is that the real choices are made in the primary.
Yes.
Because 70% of voter turnout in Idaho will vote Republican in November. Almost straight ticket.
Right.
That means that whichever candidate wins in May is almost guaranteed to win in November.
Yeah.
And so in November and October, when people get to looking at who's on the ballot and they find themselves disgusted with the candidates that are on the ballot,
Yep.
it's not because they're bad people. It's because they didn't realize the importance of the primary.
So true.
And unfortunately, raising money for a primary challenge against an incumbent is a very daunting task, right?
Yes, it is.
Because it's perceived that it's an impossible thing to do, and therefore supporting a challenger would be a waste of your money.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that that's not actually the case, right? Like I'm in a position of being very blessed financially, and had a very successful business for the last 18 years, and was able to take the time away early, at the beginning of the year to start touring the state and talking to people and sharing my book, sharing my story, getting a lot of support at a grassroots and ground level and at a county level. But that has to translate at the polls, right?
Yeah.
And this is where the numbers are interesting, right? So in Idaho, there's approximately 2 million people. Approximately 70% of those will vote Republican in November. So, that's something like, I believe 1.1, 1.2 million people will turn out on the Republican side in November on a major election. The estimates right now for the primary are 150,000 voters in the Republican primary statewide.
10%, less than. So that's a big deal. And that's kind of like, well, I'm just going to go to church on Easter and Christmas and that'll cover me. That's not good enough. We're going every Sunday. We're in Bible study because we care. And same thing with your state. Whoever wins that primary in Idaho is going to win U.S. Senate in November. That's very clear in a state like that. Yeah. But it doesn't mean you get traction on your state just because you sent another rhino establishment swamp creature back to Washington, D.C.
It's Senator Ben Sasse, who's retired. He's terminally ill, and he just did an interview on 60 Minutes. Just came out. And I have a lot of respect for Senator Sasse. I really supported him when he was in office. I supported his decision to leave when he left. He said for a lot of the senators that he knows, and I believe that our incumbent is one of them, that to be a senator is their very life's breath. Not to serve the people, not to serve the country, not to make the world better, but to just have the title of senator, to have the power and the prestige that comes with it, right? And I think, again, when I look at a state like Idaho, like what should our senators be fighting for, right? You look back in the past, our senators have fought against turning the surveillance state on Americans. That's not what our senators are fighting for today. They're all about, we don't need warrants just to spy on Americans.
Right.
Heck with that, or they fought for, they fought for the ability of the people to select senators, to change the Constitution so that we would get rid of the corruption that was in the state legislatures at the time.
Right.
Like, that's the type of people that Idaho was sent to the Senate. And now, we've got someone whose ambition is to go back and be able to go watch plays at the Kennedy Center and watch concerts at the Kennedy Center, and bully people, right? Like, that's not who we are.
Now, the American people need to understand that 9 out of 10 politicians who've never been in the private sector, never started a business, never written a check to an employee, they don't seem to understand that this person is there because they think they're going to be a Hollywood superstar. They're going to get rich. They're going to get powerful. It will lead to so much. We're sending these, quite frankly, many, you wouldn't let them watch your children. You wouldn't hire them as employees. Kamala Harris couldn't run a Burger King. And we were almost going to put her, why? Because she's a swamp creature that's embedded, and that's both sides, and it's disgraceful. I'm wondering, because this is my opinion of that, a candidate that emerges, that grassroots, and I love your story. We're going to get into it, because when you can come from nothing and do something, that solidifies and gives living proof that American dream is still right there available. Just get up and go get it. It's right there. We're losing the ability to go start a business, buy a home, afford living, because that's a big problem. And we're in Iran and we're doing things over there. We're in Israel, we're in Ukraine, we're all over the world, but right where we need to be, the candidate that can strip through the MAGA brainwash, okay, that it's America. That is not true, folks. We're watching that in live time because we've yet to get to that single American issue that the people can say, we told him go do this, and this is what done. We have to have people believing that their vote counts. You do this, I'm your employer, you go do this for me, and then come back, I'll tell you what to do next, as opposed to we sign those ballots in November, it's foot off the gas, and I'm sure these guys will do a great job. That has been going on for a lot of years now, decades. And we've come to a position in which we have a crime-ridden culture. We're infested with illegal immigration. We are actively, objectively, demonstrably protecting pedophiles at the highest level. That is going on in real time. We now have exposure on Israel that their interests are not the same as ours. The candidate that says, get rid of all of that stuff, I don't need your money, I could be sitting home playing golf, I could be gardening, you have resources to do that, and you say, no, I go fight for the state I love. What are you feeling when you go out and you're speaking to the people and you're touring? Is there a sense of this is going great, or, oh my gosh, there's frustration swelling, even in a conservative state, even though they can see it's not going well right now?
So when I did my book tour, I asked everybody that I talked to, I said, if you just wave a magic wand and fix one thing in the country, yes, at a national level, what would it be? And I will say there were so many people, it was beautiful. They're like, wow, like I just want to fix things here, yes. Which is beautiful, right? Yes. Because that's the first order of business is take care of the home, right? But the overwhelming answer was, we're so tired of the toxic rhetoric and nothing getting done in DC. And then, the polling data confirms what I'm experiencing in real life, right? The polling data says Americans are more dissatisfied with Congress than ever before. And my people are telling me we need to get stuff done. And I think, again, Senator Sass talked about this. He says, look, the Senate is supposed to be this deliberative body that is working on the biggest challenges that our nation faces that we're going to have to deal with, or they're going to bite us over the next 30 to 50 years. Right. And the reality is that we can't even fund the government fully.
Nope. That's right.
In the Senate. We don't have the courage to bring the SAVE Act to a talking filibuster. Right. And exactly. The Senate has set themselves up for all these garbage filibusters, like, because I'm a big supporter of the filibuster. I think it's a great tool to keep from a majority from trampling a minority, because neither side's always in the majority. And so that's important to have that safeguard. But it used to be that the filibuster was a rarely used tool, and that it actually cost you something to do it.
Right.
Like you had to actually work for it to succeed. And now they've set it up to where I want to say it's orders of magnitude more often that we're using the filibuster today than 50 years ago. Right. Because of all these procedural filibusters processes, as opposed to the talking filibuster, right? So people are super unhappy. That's what I'm seeing on the campaign trail. Is everyday Idahoans are disgusted that our party would want to send an 83-year-old back to Washington. Yeah. They recognize, they see through the garbage, right? And one of the things that I think has been very funny, in a kind of sad sort of way, right, is that we hear each other's speeches on the campaign trail. We're often speaking at the same event.
Yes.
I was just reviewing responses on the Ada County GOP website, which is where Boise is, so the biggest county in the state. And it's funny to see the responses and the things that I've said on the campaign trail magically appearing under my competition's comment list.
Got it.
Under, oh, this is what I believe. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, that hasn't been what you believe for the last 18 years.
That's right.
That hasn't been what you've been doing.
That's right.
But I'm glad you can take my rhetoric and you can put it, under your
and
heading.
The fear is this, Denny, and of course our guest is Denny LaVé, running for U.S. Senate in Idaho, is that the American people, that's all true. We can go back and see how you voted and say, well, obviously you're now selling me flavor of the day type stuff because this is what your track record. Nobody's doing that in America. I mean, such a minority of people in the precinct level that are spearheading it. But the most people, they could care less about the primary process. They're not going to go hold these two people to account. So we send the same old garbage to Washington. And I think this is a great example in a living moment that we can say, this is not working. Right now, Republicans control the White House, the Senate, Congress, and get nothing done. How discouraging to think with that kind of, because if Democrats had this same thing going on right now, they're not missing a beat. They are steamrolling. Just go look at the USAID fraud. It was clear we have billions of dollars being stolen, didn't touch a thing. Contrast that to Joe Biden and Merrick Garland. They rounded up those J6ers like that. Took them a month, and then all these thousands of people are collected. Republicans are cowards. Republicans are, for whatever reason, not willing to get in the face of the bully, which is the Democrat left. So it has to be somebody that has absolutely 0.0 ambitions outside of this 6-year term. Of course, we need term limits. It's never going to happen because the people have to vote for it would be cutting their own job and their own income, and so they're never going to happen. But you need the kind of heart, the soul that says, listen, this is silly. I'm going there. You can call me as big a names as you want. I don't need your money. I don't need anything beyond my representation. We've gotten so far from that kind of person, where it's like, it's just merit-based and performance, and employees that perform the way our government did. Any business owner would say, okay, are you kidding me? We are closing this department effective immediately. We're getting rid of these leads, but we don't do that. We just sit there because we're so stressed out. We're so maxed out on money, time, and chaos coming at us every day. We're just glad to survive the day. And then we entrust, our children's future to people that could not care less about the outcome for your child. It's really a sad state of affairs. I'm wondering, as you're out there on the campaign trail, is Trump a benefit to the campaign, or in a sense of, we're just going along with that line, we're in Iran, we're going to protect Epstein people, or is he a valuable thing to contrast it? Because there's a huge divide in the MAGA section. Probably 50 million fans have said, no thanks, Donald Trump, we're out. How do you see that phenomena playing out? Because you have MAGA people that say he can do no wrong. You have others that say, no, he needs to be tried, convicted, and hung for the crimes he's committed. And that's coming from the right side. What are you seeing, feeling as you're out with the people?
I'm seeing a little bit of both, right? I was at a Lincoln Day dinner where the pastor giving the invocation was, essentially saying Trump was the Lord's anointed.
So he's a Zionist.
Hallelujah. Yeah. Right. And at the same time, the rank and file people that I talk to, like, they're deeply upset at the handling of the Epstein issue. Yes. That was a core campaign promise. Yep. And I think people might question, well, why is this such a big deal? Why is this such a big deal? Well, here's why it's a big deal. Okay. Because the lived experience of Americans today is that 1 in 3 women will be sexually assaulted in her lifetime. And she wants to know that if something happens to her or her sister or her daughter, that our government is going to do the right thing. And doesn't matter how high that person is that did that bad thing, they're going to take care of it. And the reality is that 1 in 10 men are going to be impacted the same way in our country, which these numbers are off the chart, crazy evil.
Yes.
And when we don't pursue things that are so public and so egregious, like the Epstein situation, and we don't give justice to the victims, it undermines the entire faith in our system. And Donald Trump said, I'm going to do this. And then they issued their white binders of data that we already had and said there wasn't anything else. And then, oh, well, actually, here's 3 million documents that we have. That's everything. Really, you promise it is. Until Congress said, no, you will. By law, you will release everything. And then they released another few million documents. And God only knows how much more is out there and how much is buried under the redactions.
That's right.
Who knows? Yeah.
But with what we can see, we have a major problem. With what we can see, we have a major problem. And the unknown is probably more egregious than the stuff that they've released. Why is that not driving every American, Democrat to Republican, the Trump sycophant to the Trump derangement? I am so discouraged that the trafficking, eating, raping, killing of children didn't bring a unity together and say, yeah, we are way different sides. You do that to children, though, you've crossed our red line as a country. And that didn't happen. And so to me, that is the most discouraging state of America forward. And I understand a lot of it's denial. This is icky stuff. I mean, I've had, as we've been going through these files, there's days where I want to kill somebody. I read what they did or said, I want to kill, right? I know that's not godly. So I have to step away from that, discern that, but never stop talking about this is an unforgivable act, what Donald Trump has done. And because he has fallen out of favor with so many, meaning if the election was tomorrow for Donald Trump, he loses like 90-10. I mean, it's like a scary beatdown. I'm out. I only vote for Christian men that do what they say.
I think for me, the where I'm looking at is, okay, you know, my opponent's rhetoric on his campaign speeches has been Trump's great and you should vote for me.
Yep.
Trump's great and you should vote for me. And it's like, you know what? That's whether you believe Trump is great or whether you believe Trump needs to be held to account is immaterial to whether or not a sitting senator is doing his job.
Correct.
And if he's doing his job, he should be able to tell you in concrete terms what he's done over the last 18 years.
Yes.
Like I like to look at the contrast between perhaps one of the greatest senators in recent memory is Senator Orrin Hatch. And I'm looking at this in terms of like productivity, in terms of how much impact he had. In his time in the Senate, he sponsored and got passed into law something like 693 bills. Okay, I think Utah got their money's worth out of Senator Hatch.
Right.
Now, I've talked to his team, and they also said, you know what, he probably stayed one term too long.
Yep.
Okay, that's fair. But now we're sitting here in Idaho where we have a senator who, you know, as of last year when we started the campaign, had gotten 3 bills passed in 17 years, 2 of which were renewals of leases for federal reservoirs. Okay. So call it 1 bill.
Right.
In 18 years. Right. And, you know, I'm going, why would we send that person who's clearly past their prime back for 6 more years?
Yeah.
There's no good outcomes there by sending him back. There's no good outcomes back. Yeah. Because the reality is that whether it's myself, whether it's the other primary challengers, the things that Donald Trump is doing that are good, we will support those.
Yeah. Right.
The things that he's doing that violate our principles and our America first and our sovereignty, we'll oppose those.
Yes.
At least I will.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I don't believe that a sitting senator is sent to Washington to go be friends with Donald Trump.
Beautiful point.
Or any other president. I think our senators go there to legislate, to advise, to provide oversight.
That's right.
And to hold account when lines get crossed. And that's probably not going to make you a popular person with the president.
Right.
Like you can be friends, but the minute you have to call somebody out, that'll show you where your friendship really is.
That's really well said. And you can see that happening right now. Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, you dare oppose. And so you're not just going there to write laws. You're also an advocate to say, support this president. But when he gets askew, when he gets off track, when he's over here, we sent you to make sure that ain't going to fly. You're coming right back because I'm representing Idahoans that demand this, this, and this. That's your only job there. You're not looking for friends. And to be friends with somebody that would do what he's doing right now, that's an indictment on you. The easiest candidate to surpass right now is the guy that says, I'm rubber stamping and all in with every decision Donald Trump has been made. The one that's going to kick butt is say, we love our president. We wish things were going better. And he's had a great run. I mean, he has built the greatest political fan base in the history of all leaders. Doesn't mean he's not flawed. Doesn't mean he doesn't make mistakes. Doesn't mean he's not captured. And he certainly is. So you go there and you say, hey, President, we love you so much. We're going to pull you back in line every time these guys start talking in your ear and say, maybe we should just drop a couple in Iran. Maybe we should just say, hey, the system, to keep our system in place in America, we have to manipulate the Epstein files. We cannot give the people the Epstein files and let them know that billionaires, elected politicians were doing these kind of things with children. And even if they weren't guilty of raping and eating a 1-year-old, we believe because of your presence around Jeffrey Epstein, you knew what was going on and you said nothing. That's an indictment on you. You turned the other way. So the culpability is enormous for all these people in the list. Donald Trump has only one way to get back into the good graces of the American people. Give us the files and all can be made well. The problem is that's a death sentence for him. And so I really appreciate his position. Danged if he do, danged if he don't. But we sent you there with very specific demands. We needed mass deportations, didn't get it. We demanded justice for the Epstein victims. As it stands right now, and Todd Blanche, you will never get that. Okay. And then we said we need relief on inflation. And he's actually made inflation much worse with the big, beautiful bill. And then every time we go to war, your cost of living, my cost of living, I don't care where you live, it goes up. And as American people, when have you had enough? When are you just, I can't stomach another lie. I can't stomach another disappointment. I don't even care. I've never heard of this guy, but I don't want a politician ever over my family again. And we really have to do that grassroots. The guy is, he just merit-based, and that's why we voted for him.
Yeah. And it's one of those where, like, if there was a person who was in a position to hold Donald Trump and his policies to account, it would be the incumbent that I'm challenging.
That's right.
From a foreign relations committee standpoint that he's very proud of being the chair of, that would be the person who would call our foreign policy into account. And the foreign relations committee is really supposed to be shaping our foreign policy for the next 30 to 50 years. And instead, it washes its hands. I mean, he's had half as many oversight committee meetings as his predecessor.
Right.
Like, it's challenging. You know, if I'm being very honest, right, and I want to be very honest with you and with the voters, right, it's like there are days where I have to pray and seek help from my friends to sustain, you know, the hope and the mission, because I think the mission is critical and I think it is important. You know, and the challenge of getting 150,000 people to turn out and vote and be knowledgeable is no small task.
Not at all.
So, but it's important. It's critical to the nation, and I hope that, you know, that we spark people to challenge incumbents in their own states, right? I hope that, you know, in 2 years that we have a very strong challenge to our other sitting senator. You know, he's been in since the late 90s. Like, okay, it's probably time for some change. It's probably time for somebody with fresh ideas.
And you got to get the money out of politics. I mean, that's the only reason these people, they've got this machine already, the infrastructure already built in. And so we're buying seats. So, of course, the Georgia election, that's $100 million seat. Are you kidding me? Think of, and this is what always disgusts me the most about this amount of campaign money that gets spent, is it's huge money. One side loses, and that money is like put into a toilet, put into an incinerator. There is nothing to get out of that money, that the money we wasted on the loser. So we had 100 million on this side, 100 million on this side, and we get this very average to below average human being to go represent their state. Term limits, money. I mean, how about this? Everybody gets 25 grand. Spend it the best you can and let your work and your words and your passion and your heart. And that's, I guess, the other thing, too, because we're not a spiritual country. We're not a Christian country. But you would think just the discernment that comes up, you know, when you hear a Gavin Newsom speak. I mean, it should be an instantaneous process of the mind. That's snake oil. That's a demon. I reject and rebuke all of it. And it should come like this. If you're living in the spirit and you're saying, forget all that noise. Are they serving the Lord Jesus Christ? Or are they pursuing all these liberties that God gave us? And if they're not, it's next person. So for me, if you're not a Christian submitted to the Lord Jesus Christ candidate, I'm not voting. I can't, because what we see is the person that just loves America, the patriot like Donald Trump, without that foundation of Jesus Christ. And maybe he's Jewish. Now, I have no idea what he is doing, but he doesn't serve the Lord. And so that's why we see so much brokenness. That's why we see so much inconsistency, the lying. And he's really hitting a hard time. So really what I think sets up beautifully for the alternative conservative candidate is Donald Trump continues to erode, knowing that all those that co-sign, meaning if you co-sign Joe Biden's open border policy, it should make you ineligible to ever win an election at all. I mean, what you did was horrific, and it's a permanent blemish on your record. Same thing with those that are saying, go for Iran, go for Israel, keep Ukraine going, get Venezuela, get Cuba, and then completely ignore American issues. He is going to present. That's why I'm grateful, because you have to have at least some hope in this process, or it's like, I want out. It's a every man fight for himself. It's a vigilante society. And they forced that upon us because of why? Broken promises, deceit. And then now it feels like, and I'm sorry, I will never, ever, ever stop talking about the Epstein files. I've read them. Okay. So I know what's going on. For a man to send Pam Bondi up there and talk about the Dow 50,000 and talk about all the criminals that have come in under Joe Biden, and they're asking you specific questions about why you're choosing to not prosecute pedophiles, people that took children, put them in a closet, abused them 10 times a day, fed them twice a week, and then discarded them. Okay. For him to do that, it's only a matter of time before people, whoa, what happens? I am so prayerful that the exposure and what this really needs to bring people to, you cannot put your hope in man. You put your hope in the Lord Jesus Christ and you fight like a dog for his values. And if these politicians do not fit in, I'm sorry, you got to go. And it's not hard feelings. You're just fired. And Donald Trump should be so used to that. You're fired. That was his famous line. Okay. Our guest is Denny LaVé, running for U.S. Senate in Idaho. I love your story. The rags to riches, or the blue collar fight, the American struggle. That's what we all love. I was nothing, but through merit, effort, and God's grace, I've become. And now I can take the fruits of that blessing and go help my fellow man. Give us just a little taste of the story growing up, and then what brought you to a moment of, I need to do this.
So, yeah, I was born in Montana, broken family, and ended up in California for a bit, and then in Utah, and just a lot of dysfunction, right? A lot of dysfunction, drug and alcohol addictions in the family, a lot of exposure to pornography and highly sexually explicit material, and as a very, very young child, I think, to be fair, like, I think it was much more due to a neglect or a inadvertent exposure rather than deliberate exposure, right? I want to be clear about that, but it's still, as parents, we have a duty to protect. And anyhow, that led to kind of a seesaw between, being deeply spiritual, deeply connected with Christ, and then going, you're asking me to do something I can't do. I don't want to do it. And then running away, and then coming back and running away. And so, that culminated with, trying to be a Marine, having a massive heat stroke that took me out of the Marines, spending 3 days in the ICU because of that, and going, okay, God, look, you've been asking me to go do this. I'm going to go do it. I ended up in a monastery in France. Spent almost 2 years in a monastery over in France, and was fully committed there, was ready to take vows and give up a worldly life and give up marriage and children and serve the Lord.
Amen.
And they said, well, actually, we think you should go home and have a family. I'm like, okay. All right. If that's what I'm supposed to do, I guess I'll go do that. So I came back to Idaho, and eventually met my wife, who's, her family's been here in Idaho for 125 years. They're their own incredible success story.
Yeah.
And very blue collar in their own right. And what happened in my life was I kept coming back to construction as I'm really good at building things. I'm really good at this work. And then my father and I had the opportunity to start a company. And so we did. We started the company, and we grew it through the 2008 recession.
Nice.
We grew it through the recession in 2014. We survived COVID. And we work all throughout the Western United States now. And, again, it has its ups, it has its downs. And, family business will definitely test your character for sure. Yep. Many times over, it will test your character. And it, pushed me to my limits, to where, I broke down and had to fall completely on God and go, look, I'm completely in your hands.
Amen.
I can't do it without you. And, one of my mentors would say, you have a God-shaped hole in your heart, and, until you fill it with God, it's going to feel empty.
That's right.
And so that's at this point kind of the effort, right? Is to continue that life of prayer and allowing him to pour himself in, so that he can animate me throughout the day. which along that way, I actually heard another Catholic politician speak about 18 years ago, and I was just appalled because I'm like, this is someone who is openly claiming to be Catholic, and yet they're openly endorsing and signing off on policies that are absolutely against the faith.
Right.
And I thought, okay, you know what? If this man coming from a blue collar background can be a senator, there's no reason that I can't either.
Exactly.
And I took it to one of my mentors. I talked to him, and he said, hey, by the way, look, if God wants you to do this, he'll let you know when it's time. And in the meantime, you raise your family, you run your business. So that's what I did. I raised my family. I ran the business. I have six amazing sons.
Jeez, nice.
And fast forward to 24, and I was like, okay, God, I've got a team in place at work. What would you like next? And he, after several weeks of intense prayer, he said, I run for Senate. And I'm like, hold on, time out. Like, that's really big, God. If that's what you want, could you please send one of my mentors to confirm this is what you want? And a few days later, one of my mentors came up to me after church and said, hey, are you still thinking about this run? And I said, yeah. And he said, now's the time to do it. So that's how I threw myself into the race. And it's been very interesting to see the big money at play and the big pressures at play, like any successful businessman, you want to learn about what you're trying to do, and then you want to build the best team around you. Yeah. And so, I worked hard in 25 to build a very high-end team that had a lot of history of upsetting incumbents, and through various pressures of money and other sitting senators leaning on them, they actually pulled out on the day we were supposed to launch. They quit. So then it was, okay, God, what next? Like, what do you want? And we actually rebuilt a team on the ground up, like on the fly, on the ground up. Got an amazing strategist behind us. Got a couple of social media support workers helping us out, working with our media team, and I actually even got a volunteer to come from Minnesota he's a PhD scientist. He's an incredibly intelligent man whose life was catastrophically altered by COVID, and decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to go work on Denny's campaign, and I'm going to drive him all over the state because I believe in what he's doing. Awesome. So it's been a pretty wild ride to this point.
But that what the theme I just heard in there, and this is what, ladies and gentlemen, you got to listen. This is a man submitted and obedient to the voice of God, to the hearing of what are you hearing from God to do next? Because our own ideas are a disaster. When I think this is a better way to make a buck, this is a way to get what I need. Those are not coming from God. Those are coming from my flesh. Washington, D.C. is littered with the flesh, littered with the secular, littered with a true love for money, a true love for power. I believe Washington, D.C., that is their sole ambition, is how do I take this $175,000 salary and turn it into $20 million? And lo and behold, they're able to do it. I wish I had that kind of investment foresight to take this little skimpy salary and just make an empire with it. But it doesn't matter. You get into Planet, and that's why they'll never have term limits, because it does take some time to steal, take the under the table, to get the bribe. I mean, it takes some time because we know if a person's worth $100 million making $175,000 a year for 20 years, I don't care. You'd have to hit every IPO that came out perfectly every time. And we don't believe these are smart enough people. They're just well connected and they're getting insider information. I want to close it on this, Denny, as we get, your May 19th is your primary voting. What's the easiest number one thing you can take to Washington, D.C. after you are confirmed or what do they call that when the senators are, but you're now official in January of 2027. What's the easiest thing you can take on behalf of the Idaho people right to Washington, D.C.? And I say, I'm working on this first out of the gate.
Some common sense in healthcare.
Okay.
I know that doesn't sound like a super Republican thing, but this is actually, it's tied to our ridiculous levels of spending, which we need to fix, right? Because every dollar we borrow is a driver of increase in prices, which we recognize as inflation.
Yes.
And so that's a radical thing that needs to be fixed. But really, when we look at other nations around us and they're spending, for every dollar of healthcare spent, 75% goes to a frontline worker and 25% is administrative and overhead. And in America, it's 9%. 9% goes to frontline workers, and 91% is part of the administrative and overhead. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. So, you know, I'm assuming that they've done their homework, that they verified their facts, and that, you know, they're a reputable news organization, right? And when we look at the fact that $2 trillion of our budget every year is healthcare, somebody's getting rich, and it's not the American people. And the fact that these organizations and companies will profiteer, and I mean that in the full sense of the word, will profiteer off of the sickness of American people is a disgusting thing. And that should not be a partisan issue. That should be really low-hanging fruit for any politician to say, you know what, it's not okay for companies to gouge Americans. And this is what it looks like. I had a medical incident for one of my sons. This is several years back, and he needed direct IV antibiotics for several weeks at home. We got the pre-authorizations. The company sent the medications and the supplies. We gave him the medicine. You know, thanks be to God, he's well. He healed from the sickness. So that's amazing. But then we got the bill from the insurance, you know, from the provider, and they wanted $7,000, which again, it probably wasn't the end of the world for me. Like I could pay that if I had to.
Yeah.
But I'm like, wait a minute, like we got authorization from the insurance company. They lost the authorization. When we got the authorization sent to them again, they reprocessed. They accepted $1,000 as payment in full from the insurance company. So how is it that someone who's presumed to not have insurance and have the least ability to pay is getting charged 7 times more than an insurance company? That's ridiculous.
Yes,
that's gouging. Yeah. I just had an incident last year where a standalone urgent care / ER routed me to the ER billing track instead of the urgent care billing track. Sure. And then for a single tab of azithromycin, well, first off, it was a 500 milligram tab. In their billing, they billed for 500 tabs, 500 tablets at $244 per tablet. Now that tablet, I looked this up because this was mind blowing to me. That tablet, it costs 10 cents to manufacture. 10 cents.
Disgusting.
Yeah. Like I'm a reasonably intelligent individual, and I'm able to look up and figure out how to navigate the system and what are my rights as a patient and as someone who pays for the bill.
Right.
But I also have to look at it and go, it's not easy.
Right.
And a lot of everyday Americans and Idahoans, they don't have the time to go fight that fight.
Right.
And my first interactions with the company fighting the bill were not, oh, you're right, we'll look at this and we'll see how we can help. It was sorry, we can't help you. Would you like to pay your exorbitant bill?
Right.
And until
check your card, sir.
Until I did the research, showed them where the error was in the process. Even my own insurance company didn't look for the error. And until I did
you're their customer, you're their client, they should be advocating.
They should be advocating. And until I find the error and they ignored me and I said, I'm turning you into the state health insurance board for fraud if you do not respond. And I immediately got a phone call from them. Looking at it saying, oh, you know what? You're right. There's an error there. We're going to look into this and get you a revised bill.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
That's the model, though, because for every 10, okay, fine, one guy got us. He found out we were doing it. The other 9 are just going to send that money in, go into debt, and cause this cycle. And it's so ridiculous. I'm glad you brought up the healthcare because it's a major thing. It's not just the insurance. The American people are so sickly. They eat whatever. They don't exercise. They're trapped inside all the time. So we groom ourselves to be future consumers of a lot of insurance and a lot of medicine. You know, the greatest thing that could happen to the American public is that big ag, it gets shrunk down to nothing. Big pharma, they're not the biggest industry in America. We don't need your products anymore. We're healthy. So we don't need to be on cholesterol and blood pressure and depression medication for our entire lives. Why? Well, we cut out all the poison that the FDA allowed to spray on our food, to give us food dyes, processed foods, all the chemicals. Now we're sick. Well, now we sure do need insurance. And they say, perfect, we got just the plan for you. Here's something for $1,000 a month, a $10,000 deductible. And then, if you spend whatever that is, 20 some odd grand a year, we'll pay for your, when you sprain your ankle. We don't need any of that stuff anymore because we're healthy and we're independent. So the American, it's an inside job. We cannot eat the food that they give us. We cannot take all the medicines that they give us. COVID vaccines were a great example of something that you said was safe and effective, and it hurt people. How much more evidence do we need that they've abandoned their post? And you will need a bulldog. You will need a fighter to get into the grill of the CDC, the FDA, HHS, all of these people, and just say, we're stopping here. And if you need my vote to continue this, you ain't getting it, just so we're clear. And if you want to come at me, bring it on, because I speak for the people. I serve the Lord Jesus Christ, and the people who elected me said, go get this done. Kill me. I mean, that's the other thing too. Kill me. I would rather be killed as a politician than to say, hey, we're going with the Epstein cover-up. Are you in? I'm not in. And if that's a problem with it, I'm out. We're done being nice. We're done pretending that, secular men are going to just figure this out and the world will come together. It's not working. So you get right to work on healthcare, and we begin to change. We're moving. We want people off sugar. We want people off medication dependency. We want people off of the things that are keeping them in bondage. When you are 75 pounds overweight and you are on 6 different medications, you are not free. You've been slowly poisoned to death, slowly murdered. And until you say, God put all the food and the medicines that we need right here on earth. It's our job to go get the herbs, cultivate the land. And that's what we eat. But Bible people, go look anywhere else in the world. They're not the size of us. Okay. We have too much. We're overindulging. And they say, keep going. While you're stuffing your face, we're over here changing the country into something that you will no longer recognize. And we're saying, we're so done. We're out. Denny LaVé, he is running for U.S. Senate in Idaho. Tell us, where's all the places we can follow the work, support you as we get into May, and then, of course, November?
It's Denny LaVé, Denny4Senate.com.
Okay.
Denny for Senate on socials.
Excellent. We're going to get the links in the show. We'll get the social going. God bless you. We're behind you. We only vote for Christian men that submit their lives to the Lord Jesus Christ, take his direction, and say, okay, Lord, where do I go now in government? Because I'm coming after all the wickedness. I'm here to stand in the face of evil, which is a majority of Washington, D.C. So I want you in there, sir. God bless you. Thank you for doing this. We'll be with you and following up as we go. And folks, do this until next time. Tell a friend about Jesus Christ. Serve the Lord. Stay good. God bless everybody.
The Matthew Dark Show, your one-stop show for truth, courage, fellowship, and faith. Available everywhere you get your podcasts.